Hello everyone, I'm Tatiana and welcome to Infinite Chest. And today we'll talk about ancient maps. Throughout history, we have tried to draw the world, but every map is more than ink on parchment. It's a reflection of how humanity imagined reality. A map is both a confession and a dream. It tells us what we knew and what we believed was true. Scattered across dusty libraries and forgotten vaults lie maps that don't fit the story. Maps what whisper of continents long unknown, of coastlines drawn before explorers were even born. Maps that seem to suggest someone, somewhere, knew far more than history allows. These are the mysterious ancient maps. Fragments of a forgotten geography, traces of civilizations that mapped the impossible. Tonight, we unfold those parchments. We follow the ink trails that defy reason. We seek the minds who dare to chat the unseen. And this is the story of the world before the world was known. This is the unveiling of the world's most mysterious ancient maps. Before satellites, before compasses and chronometers, humanity had only the stars and the earth beneath their feet. Yet, even then, we longed to make sense of the horizon. The first maps were not of land, but of the heavens. Etched on stone and clay, they charted constellations, rivers of light across the night sky. To early humans, mapping wasn't a science, it was ritual. To map the world was to understand the divine. The Babylonians, around 600 BCE, drew what is believed to be the oldest world map, the Babylonian World Map, or the Imago Mundi, a small clay tablet, circular in form, showing a world encircled by a cosmic ocean. Babylon stood proudly at the center, the axis of creation, surrounded by mysterious outer lands labeled simply as beyond the sea. To modern eyes, it looks crude, a child's sketch. But to its maker, it was sacred geometry. Every line carved with devotion, every word a prayer to order the chaos. And yet, even here, in this earliest map, there is something extraordinary. Beyond the known world, the scribe inscribed a phrase, lands that cannot be reached. Even at the dawn of mapping, humanity sensed there were places beyond imagination, distant, unreachable realms that called to us in dreams. The Babylonian tablet reminds us, mapping was never just measurement. It was longing, the desire to see everything, even the unseen. In 1513, an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis completed a map that would confound historians for centuries. It depicted parts of Europe, Africa, and astonishingly, the coast of South America. Nothing unusual there, except that the map was drawn barely 2 decades after Columbus reached the New World. More intriguing still, along the southern edge, faint lines suggested the outline of an ice-free Antarctica, nearly 300 years before its official discovery. How could this be? When the map resurfaced in 1929 in the archives of Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, scholars were stunned. The handwriting of Piri Reis described his sources, charts and maps drawn in the time of Alexander the Great, and maps from the early Portuguese. He wrote of maps of the seas made by ancient kings. Did Piri Reis have access to knowledge passed down from a civilization long vanished? Some claimed his depiction of Antarctica showed the continent as it was before the ice, suggesting cartographers with knowledge of ancient coastlines, perhaps tens of thousands of years old. Geologists dismissed this as a coincidence. The so-called Antarctica resembles was likely the lower coast of South America. But the mystery endured, not because of the lines themselves, but because of what they symbolized: the persistence of lost knowledge. Every generation inherits fragments of memory, half-understood echoes of those who came before. And sometimes, when the fragments align, they form something we can no longer explain. Then Piri Reis Map is not just geography, it is a testimony, proof that the past is deeper, stranger, and more connected than we dare to believe. In 1965, Yale University unveiled what it called the Vinland Map, a parchment supposedly drawn in the 1400s depicting parts of Europe, Africa, and a mysterious landmass labeled Vinland, lying far across the Atlantic in the region we now called North America. If genuine, it meant that North explorers had mapped America decades before Columbus, confirming legends of Leif Erikson's voyages. The world buzzed with excitement. But soon came doubt. The ink composition, the parchment age, the handwriting, each examined, contested, re-examined. Decades of scientific testing alternately declared it a fraud, then authentic, then uncertain. And yet, the power of the map wasn't in its carbon dating, it was in its implication. For centuries, whispers had persisted of pre-Columbian transatlantic journeys. Phoenician trades, African sailors, monks from Ireland following the sun westward. The Vinland Map became the face of that longing, proof that the edges of our history might be torn, not clean. Whether genuine or not, it reignited a question that burst through all human curiosity. What if our story began earlier than we think? Every map hides a secret, not of land, but of memory. And sometimes the ink of myth seeps into the parchment of fact. The Vinland Map may or may not be real, but the world it dreams of, a world of fearless voyages and forgotten horizons, is as real as the human spirit itself. At the turn of the 16th century, Europe's powers were racing to own the world. The seas were their battleground and maps their greatest weapons. In 1502, an Italian spy named Alberto Cantino smuggled one of the most prestigious maps even made out of Portugal. It was the Cantino Planisphere, a masterwork depicting the known world with astonishing precision. Africa, Asia, and the newly found lands of the West were all charted with detailed, unthinkable for the time. How had Portuguese cartographers mapped coastlines so far beyond their expeditions? Some historians suggest they relied on older charts, secret knowledge gathered from Arab, Greek, and possibly even older sources lost to time. Cantino's stolen map became a symbol of how the quest for knowledge often collides with power. Empires rose and fell on the strengths of the lines that marked their world. To own a map was to control destiny, and in every map hidden beneath its artistry was the pulse of ambition, the human hunger to possess the unknown. The Cantino Planisphere reminds us that maps are never neutral. There are stories told by the victors and sometimes stolen from the shadows. In 1339, a Catalan cartographer named Angelina Dulcet drew a map that shimmered between fact and legend. It depicted the Mediterranean and Atlantic in exquisite detail, but of the coast of Africa it showed islets, many of which don't exist. Among them were mysterious lands with names like Antillia and Isla do Brasil. Long before explorers sailed there, these phantom islands haunted the minds of sailors and kings alike. Some scholars dismiss them as errors, misreadings of sailors' tales, or mirages on the sea. But others wonder what if these were memories, faded echoes of lands now swallowed by the ocean. The Dulcet Map carries with it the ghost of Atlantis, not as a city of gold, but as a symbol of lost civilizations, cultures that mapped the world before the world forgot them. Every blank space on a map is a confession. We don't know what lies here. But within those blank spaces lived imagination, myth, and fear, the fertile ground from which legends rise. The Dulcet Map reminds us that the line between truth and myth is not a wall, it's a horizon. In 1737, the French geographer Philippe Buache presented a map to the Academy of Sciences in Paris. It depicted Antarctica divided into two large landmasses with a network of channels and rivers, drawn as if it were free of ice. This was more than a century before modern exploration would confirm the continent's subglacial geography. How could Boucher have known? Some believe he explored it from ocean currents and geographical reasoning. Others suggest he had access to ancient maps, relics of civilizations that had seen Antarctica before the last ice age. Skeptics call it coincidence. But the coincidence grows heavier when we recall the Piri Reis Map, which also seemed to hint at ice-free polar lands. Perhaps very deep in time, there truly were peoples who surveyed the earth with knowledge we no longer possess, no myth but memories. The Buache Map stands as both marvel and mystery, a reminder that even in the age of reason, the world remained wrapped in ancient secrets. For every map that survives, countless others have perished, burned, lost to storms, or buried beneath forgotten ruins. The maps we have are but fragments of an immense tapestry. The Library of Alexandria once held maps of lands and stars copied from civilizations even older than Egypt. When it claims devoted the knowledge humanity lots not just scrolls but entire worlds. And yet the sea remembers. Beneath its waves lie shipwrecks that once carried atlases and chests to distant empires. The ocean floor is an archive, sealed patient waiting. Every generation thinks it has drawn the final map. Yet, the earth always hides another secret, another island, another truth. Perhaps the greatest mystery of maps is not where they lead, but where they come from. Who were the first to trace coastlines, to carve rivers in clay? What eyes first looked down from their mountaintop and saw the world as a shape, a whole? Maybe those early map makers were not so different from us, dreamers starting at the horizon, wondering what lay beyond. Imagine an ancient room lit by flickering oil lamps. A parchment stretched across a table of stone, hands move across it, steady, deliberate. Outside, a storm howls. Inside, the world is being redrawn. The cartographer doesn't know that centuries later his work will survive, incomplete, misunderstood, mysterious. He only knows one truth: the world must be drawn. To map is to leave behind a trace of one's soul. Every map maker becomes an immortal witness, a voice from the deep past whispering, "I was here, I saw this." When we study their work, we don't just see geography, we touch eternity. Each faded line is a heartbeat across time. These ancient maps are not mistakes of history. They are letters from forgotten minds, reaching across the ages to remind us knowledge is fragile, memory is sacred, and wonder is eternal. There is another theory. a quieter one, whispered among esoteric scholars. The ancient maps carried geometry we no longer understand. The early cartographers encoded sacred ratios, alignments, and proportions linking sites across the globe. The Great Pyramid, the Nazca lines, the Mayan temples, all positioned with uncanny precision as following a grand invisible design. Perhaps the maps were not only meant to guide travelers through space, but to align them with the cosmos. If true, these were not mere geographies. They were philosophies of space and spirit. They mapped meaning, not just distance. And maybe that is the true essence of the map, not a record of where we've been, but a mirror of how we see ourselves in the universe. What if there is still one map, hidden, sealed, waiting, a map that connects all others, revealing the truth of how our world was first shattered? Every legend hints at it. The ancient world map of Atlantis, the lost chests of Alexandria, the secret archives of the Vatican, the submerged vaults beneath the Sahara sands. If it exists, it wouldn't be a map of geography but of time. Um, Record of cycles, ages of rise and fall, light and shadow. It would show how knowledge flows like a river, vanishing and returning over and over again. Maybe that's why the ancient mapped the heavens as much as the earth, because they understood that every map of the world is also a map of the soul. We are the explorers now, tracing not coastlines but consciousness, and perhaps in some forgotten world the last map waits, not to be found, but to be remembered. The story of the world is written not in books, but in lines. Lines of rivers, lines of mountains, lines of ink and imagination. Maps are humanity's greatest poem, the geometry of learning. Each one whispers, there is more. From the Babylonian tablet to the Ottoman parchment, from the smuggled planispheres to the frozen Antarctic chats, all carry the same heartbeat. We've always been seekers. Our world has always been larger than our understanding. Perhaps the true mystery is not what the maps reveal, but what they hide. For in every child beyond every coastline lies the same silent promise. The world is not yet fully known, and maybe there is the greatest gift of all, because as long as there are maps, there will be mysteries. And as long as there are mysteries, humanity will keep moving, even ever forward, toward the next horizon.